It does not bother me to work like a 12-hour day, 16-hour day. I don't want to do that every day, and I want to like relax on the weekend after a week where I've done that. But it doesn't bother me at all to have those long hours.
I love my work and I love what I do and I love what I channel myself into. And I think for me, I had to learn how to balance that better.
Hello, and welcome to the 4th episode of Full Circle, the Magic Mindset podcast. I am Matt, and I am joined, as always, today by my co-host, Lea. We aim to bridge the gap between my study of psychology and sociology and Lea's study of astrology. Today we are into the 2nd episode of our work-life balance theme.
If you haven't already, you can listen to part 1 of this 2-part episode series on my website at lealily.com/fullcirclepodcast. And we are also available on Spotify and iTunes, where you can access all previous episodes.
How about we jump into the first segment of the day? So here's what I'll do, Lea. I'm going to wait for a second here while I explain it, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and I want you to just recap everything that you felt like was important from the first episode, just to give everybody a quick refresher. I will count you down to starting your 30 seconds, but I won't interrupt you while you're talking. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1.
Finding your masculine and feminine balance in your chart helps indicate what you're naturally working with when it comes to your work and life balance. And knowing that can help you understand if you're more naturally in work mode or life mode, and you can understand where you're going to have to put some mindful work in to create balance for yourself. So starting with your masculine and feminine balance can really help you heal the root of your work-life balance.
That was great. It was right at 30 seconds. Way to go. True expert at work.
All right, Matt, you are up. Are you ready?
I was born ready. Let's do this.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
So work-life balance is more than just balancing your job. It's about making sure that you effectively use time to give the appropriate amount of time to what you do for a living and everything else in your life, just children, partner, self-care, your friends. The balance is a moving target, and some weeks one will get more time than the others, and that's okay. And the balance will also change substantially over the course of your life. So speak up, make yourself heard, and if you don't set boundaries, people will continue to ask for more of your time.
Nice.
Yeah, excellently done. I think 30 seconds is not enough time to do the full podcast justice, so still go back and re-listen to that first episode or listen to it the first time. But I think that we're ready to hear from our listeners.
So during this part of the podcast, we usually put a question out each week, and we are so excited to have gotten some responses back on our question this week, which was, what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were little, what were you dreaming of being? Got some really, really awesome answers this week from people who wrote in, so thank you. It's cool to learn what you wanted to be when you were young. Matt, what was your favorite this week?
Well, I gotta be honest. I was a little disappointed that nobody else wanted to be an inanimate object. That did bother me a little bit, but that's okay. I'm a big fan of, I like the more, I don't know, they're common, but it's still like admirable. So like one person mentioned wanting to be a veterinarian. And I think that that's so cool to like have that passion and kind of identify that when you are younger, even if you're not able to like make your way to that profession, like things change, life changes. But I did really appreciate seeing some of those, like the vet, astronaut, things like that. What about you?
Astronaut was a fun one. I liked seeing that a lot. I also really loved Pro Surfer. That came up The ones where people were dreaming big. Singer, I loved that too. Horse breeder, just these
Mhm.
magical things that as a kid you probably looked at and you were like, wow, that would be so amazing if I could do that. And to kind of get into that kid mentality, let yourself dream a little bit again and go back to that place.
I think for me, the people that I knew and I grew up with, you had mentioned like a singer and things like that. We had a couple people that were very, very talented and wanted to take their talents beyond high school and beyond college. And so I know like their dreams were to be on like Broadway and stuff. And I can't remember the name of the actress. There was some actress that they all wanted to be like, and I can't remember who it was. In innovation, we call it like moonshot thinking, kind of throwing something out there as a goal, and it might not even be obtainable, but it's what you're going to work towards, and it gives your life purpose. And I don't know, I just really appreciate having that kind of mentality, and I think we tend to lose that as we go through school. Like school almost kind of beats it out of you and makes you be more, I'll put it in air quotes, but practical about it.
I almost wish in school we were kind of taught a little bit more of a balance between, yeah, be practical. You mentioned it in one of our previous episodes, and I love that you said it. Unfortunately, the reality is we do have to make money to live. That's just the reality of the situation. So give us those skills to do that, but then also teach us how to nurture our passions too. You know, singing might be your passion, and while not everyone makes it in that realm, that doesn't mean that it's not still possible for you.
Yeah, I think the phrase is shoot for the stars and you'll land on the moon or something like that, where it's like, you might not hit your goal, but it's still going to take you somewhere that you weren't before. There's so many cool opportunities. Like if I wanted to be a singer, and the actress's name is Sutton Foster, and that's who all my friends wanted to be, was Sutton Foster. But okay, I want to be on Broadway. Well, it's kind of like a kid wanting to be in the NFL. Like your chances are very, very slim. But maybe you find passion being a music teacher, or maybe you find passion, put those public speaking skills to work and get a job that supports you. But then community theater or something like that is something that you can continue to work with. And I think, to me, we shouldn't lose sight of the things that we wanted to be when we were kids, because there was some part of you might have just been ridiculous wanting to be a window, but there's some element of childlike wonder that I think we lose as we get older.
Now we get to talk about what's going on in the cosmos right now. The sun is in Virgo, it's Virgo season, we're in the middle of it, we're in the height of it. For those of you that may not know, Virgo is represented or symbolized by the maiden. And really cool thing, the symbol of the maiden is based on a figure in Greek mythology that was the last immortal to abandon Earth. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce her name, but I think it's Astrea or something to that
That's how
effect.
that's how I would say it. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So that really represents standing in your power this season. And we're seeing the moon moving from Capricorn to Aquarius and approaching fullness in Pisces on Friday. The moon in Aquarius over the next 2 to 3 days is going to ask us how we want to utilize the feelings we've been having lately or noticing in a productive way. So lately, like I've noticed a lot of anger and frustration in myself. And anger isn't a productive feeling necessarily because it takes a lot of energy and a lot of negative energy to sustain it. So I'm going to be dropping into play, relaxing into surrender, finding experiences to do that during this new moon stint in Aquarius. The full moon in Pisces on Friday is a harvest moon, and a harvest moon just symbolizes the moon closest to the start of fall. And the full moon in Pisces is going to provide a time of heightened intuition and connection to our heart. Emotional energy is going to be heightened, so know that you and others might be feeling all the feels and heightened emotions. And that'll probably happen Thursday leading up to this full moon, happen on Friday as the full moon hits us, and then maybe a little bit into the morning on Saturday as well. So just know that if you're feeling extra emotional or you're getting like a lot of heightened emotions from other people, probably because the moon is moving into Pisces when all that stuff is being stirred up. And then on Saturday, we're going to see Mercury and Venus shift into Libra. Mercury in Libra is going to promote efficiency and organization when it comes to communication with others and in our own personal thoughts. Venus shifting into Libra is going to promote balance in our relationships and looking at how we can create efficiency and connection through balancing our needs and the needs of others. So, how these things interact with our personal astrology and how these things affect us is going to be different for everyone. So, if Mercury is in Libra in your birth chart, like me, your communication and thought process is going to feel pretty effortless, balanced, and in flow with this transition. It feels at home for those of us with Mercury in Libra. But if your Mercury is somewhere else, let's say in Cancer like Matt, this transition is going to ask you to balance how much you listen with how much you speak. Mercury in Cancer people are listeners and they're receptive people that deserve to have those needs met in themselves as well. So it'll be a good time to practice that, putting yourself out there more and finding the people that listen to you.
I think one thing that you said that was really interesting to me is that anger is not a productive feeling. And I think, to me at least, when I think about it that way, I think anger can be a productive feeling. It's just a matter of how you channel that energy, right? And it's like, to me, it's almost like if you give like a little kid a bunch of sugar, I mean, they're going to be bouncing off the walls. But if you channel their energy into an activity, then all that energy is being put to use, and it's a much smoother experience. And so I think it's hard when you're just mad to try to be productive about it. But I could see anger being a pretty productive feeling.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that because I think it's a difference between a kid having a lot of energy and bouncing off the walls because they had a good night's sleep versus having a lot of sugar. One source is maybe not as sustainable or productive essentially as getting a good night of sleep and feeling energized because it's coming from like a healthy place. So for me, sitting in that anger, which is where I've kind of been at certain points, it's not productive for me to sit in that feeling. It's more productive for me to say, okay, what is this masking? Like, what is the anger stemming from or coming from? And looking at that. So I guess it's a warning bell. It's an indicator. And I think you're right. In that way, it is very productive to know, okay, there's something here that I need to look at. And so once I've acknowledged that feeling, okay, I'm feeling anger. Now, how do I surrender to, okay, what is it that's coming up for me?
I think we're in agreement. We're just describing it in different ways. Listening to your description, that's very much how I intended my comment, at least. But I think we're on the same page. I just like the idea that, anger is your mind saying, hey, something is wrong, panic, 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 like red alert. And then it's up to you to, in your conscious mind say, okay, why am I getting these red alerts from my body, from my mind? Like, what do I need to do differently now so that I can either move past this or address whatever is causing it? So I think we're on the same page there.
Our featured business this week is Living Earthy, owned by my wonderful friend Kendall, who is an intuitive transformation coach, an energy healer, and an herbalist. Her mission is to help people reconnect with the earth and their soul to bring greater collective expansion. She provides immersive experiences that support spiritual or woo-curious women to get unstuck, step into confidence and clarity, and create momentum toward the impact they want to have in the world. Kendall also makes handmade herbal remedies and self-care products, as well as abalone jewelry for people to create a deeper, everyday connection with themselves and the earth. You can head to our website for links to Kendall's site and shop. Use the code FULLCIRCLE for 20% off. So Matt, when you hear the phrase or the wording of being grounded or feeling grounded, what does that mean to you?
That's a very interesting question. I think for me, when I think of grounded, it always goes to the thought of like electricity. Like you wear rubber soled boots or something so you don't get electrocuted. I don't know that that's actually the right way to not get electrocuted. So like, don't do it. But to me, it's, electricity is this wild energy. And when you're grounded, you are channeling that wild energy through safe venues. And so to me, when I talk about being grounded or when I hear about somebody saying, I feel grounded, it's, we've taken all of this wild stuff that's going on and, there's always things happening around us. And we have channeled that through the safety of our rubber souls, whatever that may be in real life, and put that energy to use in an effective way. Very similar, I think, to the conversation about anger that we were just having is you feel this intense feeling, you take a minute to address it, and then you channel it in a safe way.
What do you think it means to be ungrounded?
Can we just play back everything I said and just say not at the end? No, I think that being ungrounded, it would be the opposite in that you have this powerful energy, whether it be I'm really excited about this thing at work or I'm really upset about something that happened in my personal or professional life. And when you're ungrounded, you just it's like a machine gun. You're just spraying everywhere and just throwing that energy at anything that it'll stick to. And I think that can be a very exhausting experience. I think that it can be a destructive experience. And so I think when we feel that way, it's important that we make efforts to correct and efforts to channel in a more effective way.
I really like what you said about harnessing forces through a safe channel. And I know you didn't say it in exactly that way, but that really just resonates with me in terms of harnessing your energy and making sure that the vessel that you're moving it through is grounded and connected and healthy.
Now it's time for another one of my favorite segments. I think across the 2 episode arcs that we do, the pieces that I really enjoy the most are digging in from the academic side of things and then providing this real world application where Lea and I talk about our personal experiences with the theme that we've been talking about for, at this point, 2 weeks. So I'll go ahead and dive into my own work-life balance. I have had several shifts over the last 10 years or so. When I was in school, I worked with a full course load. So I had around 18 credit hours and then worked a minimum of 20 hours a week. I was really satisfied with this. It's about 38 hours just like sitting in the office or sitting at school. And then there's obviously extra time for writing papers and doing research and various things that would keep you over at work. But I felt so satisfied with it because I had some flexibility with work to focus on my academics. So there was the ebb and flow of, hey, this week is really light, or it's spring break or something like that. So I can spend more time at work versus, hey, it's finals week. It's time for me to go home and study and work on papers and things like that. And then once I was out of school, I had one job where I worked exactly 40 hours a week, no more, no less. Didn't need to take work home with me. It was very boom, I'm at work, here we go. And then boom, I left work, there we go. The job that I worked after that was closer to 55, 60 hours a week, which again, the hours didn't bother me, but I was way more stressed in the particular job because I had so much less flexibility. It was a lot harder if I needed to visit home or go out of state for something or the other. It was a lot harder to do that. And then my most recent position, the position that I'm currently in, I work between 45 and 60. It's a little bit of ebb and flow, but I feel so much better about the work that I'm doing because, you guessed it, I have the flexibility. So some weeks, I'm working 45 hours a week. And then there are other weeks where, you work 70 or 80 because that's just what the job requires at that moment in time. But the cool thing is I always get a chance to recharge after those weeks, whether it's working from home one day, taking a mental recovery day, whatever it may be. The thing that I mentioned really contributing to my enjoyment of the job, regardless of hours, is me engaging in that balance. It's the flexibility. So a couple of the things that I have done to make sure that balance is what I need it to be. especially in my adult life once I was out of school, turning off email notifications on my phone. I am the type of person that when I have a notification on my phone, if I have an unread email, an unread text message, I have to read it and I have to read it right then and I need to respond. So if I constantly was getting email notifications, I would never unwind from my day. The other thing that I do is because I don't really have any obligations at home, I'm fine to work from home. The other thing that I mentioned in our first episode is I take back time often. So when I'm traveling, I use that time as my own. I don't work on email. I don't complete tasks or anything like that. I focus on Netflix or HBO Go or Hulu or whatever streaming service I have the internet capability to do at that moment in time.
So, how would you say your work life balance feels in your life right now?
I like it. I'm good with where I'm at. It's like I said, it does not bother me to work. Not that I'm being asked to do this or anything, but it does not bother me to work like a 12-hour day, 16-hour day. I don't want to do that every day, and I want to like relax on the weekend after a week where I've done that. But it doesn't bother me at all to have those long hours. I think one of the things that makes me appreciate my current role is that I am able to, work long hours sometimes, and then, like I said, kind of ebb and flow that back, so that then the next week, I get the opportunity to take a mental recovery day or work from home since I maybe was traveling for a while and hadn't been home in my own, apartment for a while. And so that type of flexibility, I think, is something that I really value. And so it makes me feel better about my work life balance, knowing that I've got the opportunity to do that.
What's your favorite thing to do outside of work that doesn't have to do with work?
So, like that recovery time, the time that we're spending on the life part of the work life balance,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a very influx person. There might be a day where my ideal thing is sitting at home alone and just watching some Netflix or just relaxing in some capacity. And then there are times where my favorite thing to do is get a bunch of people together and either meet up in an apartment and play some games or go out or whatever social activity we decide to do. So I kind of mix between that introversion and extroversion at various points of life, depending on how I feel in the moment.
That's such a Gemini thing. I love it.
So why don't you walk me through your experiences with work-life balance? I'm always very interested to get your perspective on things.
So, I'm realizing that work life balance is really almost difficult for me to talk about my personal experience with because it has felt, I think, so up and down. It really started for me in college. I think that's when it starts for most of us, where we're put in this environment where we are working probably the hardest we've ever worked. So I found myself in college working the hardest I had ever worked on top of having a job. And because I was in the theater program, I was also required to do shows and crew shows on top of my class load and workload. And so making all of that work, my life was very work oriented. So spending 4 years in that structure, graduating, moving into the work world, still sort of in that mentality of being very work oriented, looking for a job, which you do when you're out of school, especially as somebody who was working toward being an actor, meant I had to have a job to support myself while I was trying to break out in my art. And realized that I kind of didn't have a social life. I didn't have much of a social life in college. I found my friends and the people that I spent the most time with were at my job, in my classes, and in the shows I was in. So, in a lot of ways, my social life was tied up in my work life. I didn't have a social life really outside of anything that wasn't school related. And when I did have weekends or a moment to myself or a couple of hours to myself, I honestly can't even remember what I would do with it. Then I worked some jobs in LA that had hours of structure, but since I had such a weird relationship with work and in Matt, getting the framework that you gave us last week of realizing I had all of these psychological contracts within the jobs I was working in LA. And a lot of them had a very negative effect on me, which meant that work was very hard and heavy and stressful and negative. And because work was so much of my life felt heavy and stressful and just anxiety ridden, really.
I think I see a lot of that, like just in our interactions. And I'm sure that others that have interacted with you or been listening to the podcast can see it too, that those psychological contracts, I think you really take to heart some of the informal ones. I think you put a lot of, maybe it's just high empathy. I think you put a lot of yourself into what you give to other people, and I think that that really does blur those lines for you. And so I think it becomes difficult for you to balance in some cases. And I'm sure you'll talk more about kind of your growth journey, but I think it does become difficult for you to balance because you put so much of yourself in others.
Definitely. That's a me thing. That's a Virgo thing. My astrology has really helped me understand that about myself and kind of understand what I need in my work environment, because you're right, because that is so important to me. And so I had had a lot of job experiences where maybe that wasn't valued or it wasn't what was needed. And so it was really hard to feel comfortable and settled and useful in my work environment. And that was making things uncomfortable for me, which was where the root of my anxiety was. But I didn't know that. I didn't have that framework. So all I knew was I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling stressed and scared and freaking out. And also brings me back to when we were talking about anger earlier. My anxiety was a warning signal, but I couldn't figure out where the shutoff switch was. So I lived in a lot of anxiety for a really long time, which was hard. I just needed to figure something else out. So I started my own business so I could have a little bit more control over my work because it was giving me so much anxiety. While the business was great and I had some wonderful clients and I created some awesome work, I also was working over 40 hours a week. And when I was not working, doing something like watching TV or just hanging out, I was working in my head. And it got to the point where someone would come up to me, Clay would come up to me and say, like, try to start a conversation with me while I was watching TV. And I used to get so internally frustrated with him because I was working while I was watching TV, but he didn't know that. To somebody outside of my own head, it looks like I'm watching TV and taking a minute to myself, when in reality, I'm planning and thinking about all the things I need to do and telling myself I'm relaxing when I'm actually not. That was kind of my way of being for a while, was working crazy weeks and crazy amount of hours because I could. So I was able to just work from sunup till sundown, till the early hours of the morning if I wanted to. And I did. And parts of me enjoyed that and parts of me were really stressed. I still experienced a lot of anxiety. I love my work and I love what I do and I love what I channel myself into. And I think for me, I had to learn how to balance that better. And this opportunity presented itself for Clay and I to go on a 3-month road trip across the country. And that really introduced the life part of this work-life balance that we've been talking about to me fully. I'd never really understood or experienced what it felt like to just be living in the moment. And I think we hear that phrase a lot and we've all experienced it differently. But this required me to do that for 3 months. And that was longer than I think I was prepared for and longer than I had ever done before. But those are the experiences, I think, when you grow the most. And so while I was still maintaining my business and working, I was doing that a little bit less as traveling became sort of a prevalent thing in my life and enjoying the landscape of the country we were traveling across. So I really experienced what it felt like to just live life. Then we got back to LA and then we ended up moving to Kentucky. And since I've been here, I've really noticed that I need structure as much as I try to avoid it, as much as I have never really been able to settle into it. I need it. And having a part-time job at the brewery here so that I'm able to integrate into the community and meet people and make new friends, but also have a little bit more of a structure around my time has been really, really helpful in taking that work experience that I value and a place that values me, putting myself into my job, and the time that I'm not there, I'm able to use to do my astrology work and to do this and to spend time with friends and to actually have downtime now where I do shut my brain off and learning how to do that. So it's been a practice for me to keep that in my scope and sort of reconfigure my own personal balance a little bit. This episode has definitely made me think about it more in terms of how I'm doing, where it started, and what I still need. So practicing working within a structure has been really good for me. And it's still a practice. Some days it's still hard. Sometimes I still find myself wanting to shift back into old habits of like, oh gosh, my time is scheduled. I like want to get out of this versus the structure is really good. You have time before and after this and relating to structure in a new way. And I think that's been the key piece to my work-life balance is structure that doesn't feel super militant. It still allows me to be free, but that can still work within a structure. You can still be free within a structure. And I'm learning how to do that.
So it sounds like to me then, kind of like from a summarization perspective, and feel free to jump in if you feel differently, but it's kind of going from one end of the spectrum to the other to now slowly finding that kind of sweet spot. I won't say in the middle because that's not necessarily where the sweet spot is, but finding whatever that sweet spot is.
Yeah, it's that pendulum. Exactly like you said, it swung very far to one end, swung very far to the other end. I've experienced both extremes. And now with that knowledge of the spectrum, it's like, okay, where do I sort of want to settle a little bit for now? And I love that you mentioned that it will change. It will change over time and just being aware of that.
We talk about a lot of things over the course of approximately 1 hour of episode. And I think it's really important that at the end of each 2 episode arc, we take the time to boil it down to the specifics that are important to us, the things that we're going to walk away from this experience understanding.
What are you taking away from these past 2 episodes?
For me, everything comes down to communication. I think that this is going to be true across the board for many, many, many of the topics that we talk about. I've always been a big proponent of communication, even if it's difficult. So I think communicating often and communicating effectively. Your needs are going to change, and you have to make the people around you aware of those needs in an appropriate way, or it would be completely unreasonable for us to think that they're going to know what we need in that moment. I'd say don't be afraid to take time for yourself when you need it, and don't be afraid to allocate time for others when they need it. What about you? What are you taking away from the last 2 episodes?
For me, it's what we need in our work lives and our personal lives is just that. It's personal. And it varies from person to person. By knowing what you're inherently working with, you can better identify what you need and how to create a better work-life balance for yourself. So right now, just notice without judgment or the urge to fix, if you observe yourself working too much or maybe playing too much in your day-to-day life and just going from there. This exploration starts with honesty with yourself and the life you want to create for yourself. So try to create maybe more work and life, masculine and feminine balance in each of your days. By starting small, you'll be working toward the best balance for you.
As always, we like to end our episode with a little wellness tip and a tarot card to walk away with to apply to the rest of your week. And as we have done with all previous episodes, we are working to round out the 6 pillars from Carol Riff's 6 Pillars of Psychological Well-Being. This week we have purpose in life. In the past 2 episodes, we've talked a lot about advocating for yourself and ensuring that you get the right work balance for you. The tip for today is more focused on helping you understand what that balance actually is versus talking about how to obtain it. So take time this week to reflect on what you want out of life, both long and short term, whether that's your personal life or your professional life. The goals that you take away from that self-reflection will help you determine what work-life balance is appropriate for you, and then you can use our tips and tricks to obtain that balance.
I think our tarot card this week ties in really nice to that as almost a foundation for taking action in that way. The 8 of Pentacles is the card that sort of represents craftsmanship and skill. And depicted on this card is a spider in the middle of her web. Spiders are a master of their craft, and webs are weaved in sometimes really strange places, but they're always weaved with skill and intricacy and confidence. So this card is really about honing your skills and becoming a master of your craft. This is a supported time, especially with Virgo season and with this card coming up, to find a new hobby, routine, or healthy pattern and devote yourself to it. If you already have one or you're one that you're working on, maybe it's your work-life balance, stay on it, keep committed to it, because it's really going to support you in figuring out what those short and long-term goals are and the work that it's going to take to get there. So this is a really good practice of taking one skill, devoting some time, honing in on it, getting that practice set, and then figuring out what those bigger things that you want are in your life. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast. If you want to learn more about us or hear previous episodes, you can visit lealily.com/Full Circle Podcast. There you can find previous episodes and also our show notes, where we include previous tarot pulls, links, and more extras from each of our episodes. You can also engage with us on Twitter at @fullcircle_POD. And we also have a community on Facebook under Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast, where we hope to communicate and talk with you. You can share your insights, your thoughts on our themes, and more in that community. If you want to listen to more of our episodes, we are on Spotify and iTunes, and also on my website. We release new episodes every Monday. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.